Imagine your nearest grocery store is a 2-hour ferry ride away. Imagine your village has more bears than people. Imagine watching your hometown shrink, house by house, year by year, and choosing to stay anyway. Now imagine that across Japan, over 8 million homes sit completely empty, ghost houses in ghost towns. The government is literally giving them away for free. And still, people are leaving. But some aren't. These are 12 of Japan's most isolated communities, and the real reasons people refuse to abandon them. Japan has a problem most countries would find hard to believe. The population is shrinking. Rural areas are emptying out at a staggering rate. There are now more than 800 villages classified as Genkai Shuraku, marginal communities, where over half the residents are 65 or older, and basic functions like road maintenance and farming can no longer be sustained. The government has a word for the abandoned houses left behind: Akiya. There are 8 million of them, but here's what the statistics don't tell you. Some people are going back, some never left, and their reasons are not what you'd expect. Population: 170 people. Location: the Pacific Ocean, 358 kilometers south of Tokyo. Technically still part of the Tokyo metropolis, making it simultaneously the most remote and the most urban place in Japan. There is no airport. The only way in is a helicopter, weather permitting, or a ferry that gets canceled roughly 50% of the time due to waves. The island sits inside an active volcano. The village sits inside the volcano's crater. There's a second, smaller volcanic cone inside that crater. Residents live inside a volcano inside a volcano. The last major eruption was 1785. It killed a third of the population. The survivors evacuated. 50 years later, they came back. Let that sink in. The island literally erupted and killed hundreds of people, and when it was safe, the survivors chose to return. Today's 170 residents are their descendants. A fisherman whose family has been on Aogashima for 6 generations said something that sounds impossible until you stand on the island yourself. The mainland has everything. We have this. There is no comparison. The geothermal heat from the volcano is used to smoke food and heat natural saunas. The Pacific views from the crater rim are unlike anything in Japan. Black sand beaches. Water so clear you can see 30 meters down. It is one of the hardest places in Japan to reach. It has a wait list to visit. Population: 2,440. Distance from Tokyo: 1,000 kilometers by sea. There are no flights, ever. The only connection to the mainland is a single ferry, the Ogasawara Maru, that takes 24 hours each way and departs roughly once a week. If you miss it, you wait. The islands were uninhabited until the 1800s. Today's residents are a mix of descendants of American, European, and Pacific Islander settlers who arrived in the 1830s and Japanese settlers who came later. Some families carry both English and Japanese surnames. Some older residents still speak a Creole dialect that exists nowhere else on Earth. In 2011, the islands were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for their extraordinary biodiversity. 195 species of land snail found nowhere else, birds that exist only here, coral reefs that rival anything in the Indo-Pacific. A marine biologist who left Tokyo to raise her family here explained the math she did. In Tokyo, I had everything available and experienced nothing. Here, I have almost nothing available and experience everything. Her kids free dive. They know every reef by name. They speak the old Creole words their neighbors taught them. The ferry schedule runs their lives. Medical emergencies are terrifying. The nearest major hospital is 24 hours away by sea, or an emergency helicopter that may or may not reach you depending on weather. Career options are almost non-existent outside tourism and fishing. She does not regret a single day. Population: 1,500 in the Greater Valley. Location: the mountains of Gifu Prefecture. For most of its history, snowed in for 5 to 6 months a year. Roads connecting it to the outside world weren't completed until 1972. Shirakawa-go is famous for its gashozukuri farmhouses, massive thatched roof structures built to shed the extraordinary snowfall of the Japanese Alps, with roofs pitched at 60 degrees that look like hands pressed together in prayer. Some of these buildings are 300 years old and still inhabited. Here is what makes this community fascinating. The government has declared it a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tourists come by the millions, and the residents are still deciding what that means for them. Some families have converted their ancient farmhouses into guest houses, minshuku, where visitors sleep in 300-year-old rooms and eat meals cooked over irori hearths. Others have watched their neighbors do it and said no. We live here. This is not a museum. The tension is real. An elderly farmer whose family has maintained their gasho farmhouse for 7 generations described it carefully. The tourists see a postcard, we see our home. Sometimes I'm not sure they understand the difference. His grandson is in Nagoya studying engineering. Whether he comes back is uncertain. The knowledge of how to maintain these roofs, a rethatch, takes an entire community working together. A practice called UEI is disappearing along with the people who carry it. If the young people don't return, the farmhouses become hotels. The village becomes a theme park. The living culture becomes a display. Some residents have decided that preventing that outcome is worth the isolation, the snow, the distance. Population, 28,000, and dropping by roughly 1,000 per year. Location, the Korea Strait. Closer to South Korea than to mainland Japan, 50 kilometers from Busan, 130 kilometers from Fukuoka. Tsushima has been on the front line of Japanese history for over 1,000 years. The first Mongol invasion fleet landed here in 1274. The decisive naval battle of the Russo-Japanese War, the Battle of Tsushima, was fought in these waters in 1905. The island has been watching history happen around it for millennia. Today, it faces a different kind of threat. The fishing industry that sustained the island for centuries has collapsed. Young people leave for Fukuoka and don't come back. Entire villages in the island's interior have been abandoned. And the Tsushima leopard cat, an endangered subspecies found only here with fewer than 100 individuals remaining, faces extinction as its habitat disappears. But something unexpected is happening. South Korean tourists discovered Tsushima. They come in enormous numbers. Before COVID, over 400,000 South Korean visitors per year were landing on an island of 28,000 people. Entire streets in the main town of Izuhara have Korean signage. Korean restaurants have opened. Korean is spoken as freely as Japanese in some shops. A shopkeeper who was born on the island left for Osaka in her 20s and came back in her 40s to take over her parents' store, described the strangeness of it. My island is becoming something I don't entirely recognize, but it's still my island. That's why I came back, to make sure some of it stays what it was. Population, 12,000. Location, 60 kilometers south of Kyushu. Accessible by ferry, 2 hours, or a short flight. By Japanese standards, this isn't extreme isolation. By any other standard, it is another world entirely. Yakushima receives up to 10 meters of rainfall per year. One of the wettest places in Japan, it is covered by ancient cedar forest. The Yakusugi cedars, trees over 1,000 years old, are so massive and so old that they were used as the visual inspiration for the forest in Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke. The oldest known living cedar on Earth is here. It is called Jomonsuki. It is estimated to be between 2,000 and 7,200 years old. It has been alive since before the Roman Empire. The people who stay on Yakushima have made a specific calculation. They live inside one of the most extraordinary ecosystems on Earth. The forest is not a backdrop to their lives. It is the reason for their lives. A forest guide who turned down a corporate job in Tokyo to lead hikes through the ancient cedar groves said, My colleagues in Tokyo make 3 times what I make. They have never stood next to a tree that was alive before Christ. I have done it this morning. I know which life is richer. Population, approximately 40 permanent residents. Location, 50 kilometers off the coast of the Noto Peninsula in the Sea of Japan. Ferry service, when weather allows, takes about 2.5 hours. Hagura is famous among birdwatchers for one specific reason. It sits directly on the East Asian Flyway, the migration route for hundreds of bird species crossing between Siberia and Southeast Asia. In spring and autumn, rare birds that almost never appear elsewhere in Japan land on Hagura to rest. Birdwatchers come from across the country for a chance to see species that might land there once in a decade. The permanent residents, almost entirely elderly, are not birdwatchers. They are the descendants of fishermen who have worked these waters for centuries. There is no doctor on the island. There is a small school with, depending on the year, 0 to 3 students. The ferry doesn't run in bad weather, which in the Sea of Japan in winter means it often doesn't run at all. An 80-year-old woman who has lived on Hagura her entire life was asked why she never moved to the mainland. She said, "The mainland came and took everyone else. It didn't take me." She said it without bitterness. Population, fewer than 100 people, approximately 200 cats. The cats outnumber the humans by a significant margin. Tashirojima is a small island in Ishinomaki Bay accessible by ferry. The fishermen who settled here centuries ago noticed that cats gathering near fishing nets predicted weather and fish movement. They began to treat the cats as sacred. A small shrine was built to honor a cat that was accidentally killed by a falling rock. Feeding and caring for cats became community practice. Today, the cats run the island. Tourists come specifically to experience a place where cats are not pets, but residents with equal standing. The humans built the island around them. The permanent residents, almost all elderly, have watched their population drop from over 1,000 to under 100 over the past 50 years. Young people left. The tsunami of 2011 damaged the island significantly, but the cats remain, and the tourists keep coming to see them. And the elderly residents who stayed have decided that if their island is remembered for anything, this is not the worst thing to be remembered for. A retired fisherman put it plainly, "The mainland forgot about us. The cats didn't go anywhere, so we stayed with the cats." Population of outer islands, 1,000 to 5,000 each. Distance, up to 600 kilometers from Kagoshima, 12 to 24-hour ferry journeys. The Amami Islands occupy a biological and cultural borderland. They are technically Japanese, but sit geographically between Japan and Okinawa. The local culture, the music, the textiles, the relationship with the ocean, is distinct from either. The Oshima Tsumugi silk fabric woven here has been made for over 1,300 years and is recognized as an important intangible cultural property. A single kimono can cost $10,000 to $20,000. The women who weave it, the knowledge is almost entirely held by women, are aging. The apprentices are few. Each weaver who dies without passing on her specific pattern techniques takes something irreplaceable with her. A textile artist who returned to her grandmother's island after 10 years working in Tokyo described the moment of decision. "I was in a meeting in Tokyo when I realized the pattern my grandmother taught me would die with me unless I went back. The meeting didn't matter. The pattern did." She went back. She is teaching. Population, 3,000. Location, the northern tip of Okinawa's main island, called Yanbaru, the remote forested region that feels entirely unlike the resort-heavy south of the island. Ogimi Village holds the record for the highest concentration of centenarians per capita in the world, not in Japan. In the world. People here routinely live past 100 in good health. They garden into their 90s. They maintain social circles. They eat from their own land. Researchers have studied Ogimi for decades trying to understand why. The answers point to diet: bitter melon, purple sweet potato, seaweed, small amounts of pork; social connection, purpose, moderate physical activity, and something the Okinawans call ikigai, a reason to get up in the morning. The young people left, the old people stayed, and the old people outlived everyone's expectations. A 97-year-old woman who still tends her garden every morning was asked what kept her going. She said, "My vegetables need me. My neighbors need me. What would I do in the city? Watch television and wait." Ogimi is not dying. It is, statistically speaking, doing the opposite. Population: 7,900. This one is different. Inakadate is not isolated by geography or ferry schedules. It's isolated by category. A rice farming village in the deep rural north of Honshu that should have been in decline for 30 years. Instead, it became world famous. In 1993, with their population shrinking and young people leaving, the village started planting their rice paddies in patterns. Different varieties of rice with different colored grains, arranged to create enormous images visible from above. Rice paddy art. The images started simple: a mountain, a face. Over the years, they became extraordinary: multi-story figures, famous paintings recreated in grain, the Mona Lisa, Napoleon, ancient Japanese warriors. Images so detailed they're hard to believe were grown, not painted, across hectares of rice paddies. The art drew visitors. The visitors told others. International media covered it. The village that had been emptying out became a destination. A young man who had moved to Sapporo came back to help his father farm. "My friends thought I was crazy to go back to rice farming. Then they saw our paddies on CNN. They stopped laughing." Inakadate proved something important. Rural Japan doesn't have to be the same rural Japan it was. It can be something new without abandoning what it was. Population: various, many villages under 50 people. Location: the Noto Peninsula, which juts into the Sea of Japan from Ishikawa Prefecture. Remote enough that the peninsula has its own regional identity, its own dialect, its own food culture. Note: the January 2024 earthquake devastated parts of Noto. This section should acknowledge that reality. In January 2024, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck the Noto Peninsula. Over 240 people were killed. Entire villages were flattened. Roads were destroyed, cutting off communities for weeks. The question Japan asked afterward was brutal and practical. Should these villages be rebuilt? The population was already elderly and declining. Rebuilding in isolated, seismically active areas. Was that the right use of resources? Some residents answered that question themselves. Before rescue teams arrived, neighbors were pulling neighbors from rubble. Communities that had seemed near death were suddenly organized, functional, mutual. People who had been told for years that their way of life was ending showed exactly what that way of life meant when it was tested. An 80-year-old man who was pulled from his collapsed home by neighbors he had known for 60 years said, "They told me this village was dying. My neighbors just saved my life. That is not what dying looks like." The rebuilding is ongoing. Some people have left, some have come back specifically to help. The question of which villages survive is still open. But the earthquake revealed something that the population statistics had hidden. These communities were not simply declining. They were holding. Population: 1,500. Location: a mountain village in the interior of Shikoku, the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands. No tourist attractions, no famous landmark. A long drive on winding mountain roads from anywhere. Kamikatsu should not be on this list. It is not the most isolated community in Japan. It is not the oldest. It is not the most endangered, but it might be the most important. In 2003, Kamikatsu adopted a zero-waste policy. Not a goal, a policy. Residents sort their garbage into 45 categories. There are no garbage trucks. You bring your waste to the recycling center yourself. Sorted, clean, categorized. The community recycles over 80% of its waste, one of the highest rates of any community on Earth. This required something. It required everyone to buy in. It required neighbors to know each other well enough to hold each other accountable. It required a level of community cohesion that modern urban life has largely eliminated. And it worked. Not just environmentally, it worked socially. The recycling center became a community hub. Residents began a kuru-kuru shop, a store where unwanted items are left for others to take for free. Clothes, tools, furniture. Things exchanged between neighbors rather than thrown away. A young woman who moved to Kamikatsu from Osaka, one of thousands of people who have relocated to rural Japan in recent years, a movement called Inaka Gurashi, countryside living, described why she chose this specific village. In Osaka, I produced garbage and didn't think about it. Here I know where everything goes. That sounds small. It changed how I live. Kamikatsu has become a model. Other municipalities study it. Students visit from around the world. The village that should have been forgotten became a template. It proves what Inakadate proved and what Fogo Island proved before it. That isolated communities don't have to accept the story written for them. What ties these 12 places together is not their remoteness, it's the question they're all answering. Japan has 8 million empty houses. It has hundreds of villages that will likely not exist in 30 years. The economic logic of urban concentration is overwhelming. It says, leave. Come to where the jobs are. Come to where the hospitals are. Come to where the future is. But the people in Aogashima and Ogasawara and Shirakawa-go and Yakushima and Higura and Tashirojima and Ogimi and Kamikatsu heard that argument and made a different calculation. They traded convenience for belonging. Access for identity. The city's everything for one specific place that meant something irreplaceable. Maybe they're wrong. Or maybe they've figured out something the rest of us are still searching for. What would you trade for a life like that? If you've visited or lived in any of these places, tell me in the comments. I want to know what I got wrong and what I missed.